Okay, so you know about these invisible scars, these unseen emotional wounds from emotional abuse. But there is a wound that many of us carry specifically that is invisible, that is also screaming. And this is the wound of being unwanted, unseen, left behind, abandoned, or rejected. Now, if this is the first time that you're hearing my voice on this podcast, my name is Allison K. Dagny. I am a subconscious healing expert. I help women recover from emotional abuse. I was in a 20-year emotionally abusive relationship, and I escaped that relationship and made it my mission to heal from all of those invisible wounds. And that's why I'm here today, is to help you do the same thing. I am a best-selling author of my memoir, When Tears Leave Scars, and Radiate and Rise, Discovering Peace and Power During and After Divorce. And you can find both of those books on Amazon or anywhere that you look for your favorite reading. And I'm in the process of writing a third book right now, which is all about the how-to healing. But today, I really want to focus on these specific childhood abandonment and rejection wounds and how that shows up in our day-to-day as adults. And I remember being a little girl who felt like that I was not really seen very much unless I was performing, where I carried that into my daily life. Now, you may have felt differently. Maybe you were the little girl who felt like that you were too much or too loud, or you talked too much in class, or like whatever. But it's all going to be different for each of us, right? And I learned early on in life how to get that love, to keep people close to me. And I would do that by performing. I would do that by trying to overachieve and do as many things as I could do to get attention. Now, I wasn't doing things like acting out. I was doing things like getting the best grades, getting the awards, striving for the blue ribbons. Those were the kinds of things that I was trying to do, trying to like get attention based on my actions and the achievements that I did. Maybe you can relate to that. Maybe you can relate to something else, right? But regardless of what it is, and we're going to talk about all these things, as your little mind is being formed, as it's growing and developing, you are being programmed from the time that you're born up until about age 8. Your little mind is a sponge and it's taking in everything it can. And the other aspect of this that many people don't realize is that your brain and your body and your nervous system is doing everything it can to help you feel safe, to help you feel secure and protected. And if you aren't feeling like that in your life as a little child, well, your body's job, your brain's job, your nervous system's job is to step in to help you. And so that's why we do things that we do. That's why we have these things called trauma adaptations. And a trauma adaptation is just anything that we do to help us adapt to the situations, the traumas, the experiences, and the circumstances that have created fear or a feeling of unsafety. All right, so let's talk about some of these things and what they look like. So I'm going to give you several examples, and maybe you'll relate to some of these. Maybe you'll be nodding your head. So, after we do this, I'm going to explain what these abandonment and rejection wounds actually are, and then talk a little bit about attachment styles. If you're not familiar with that, I'll give you some information on that. And then why it could be problematic to lean on some of these labels, and then what true healing looks like, okay? So first and foremost, let's talk about some of these things that you might relate to. So let's say you were the child whose mother would shut down emotionally. Anytime that you did something, said something, came to your parent with a problem, a hurt, an issue, And maybe your mom, and this could obviously be your father as well, depending on who, or primary caregiver, that sort of thing. But maybe this person made you feel invisible. Maybe this person kind of, because they shut down emotionally and they would not, wrap you in their arms and console you or give you advice or talk to you or even just hear you, it made you feel invisible. So if you were that person, that little child whose parent shut down emotionally, didn't want to feel the emotions, maybe your emotions were too much for them to handle, right? And I'm not saying that they were too much. It was just that your parent didn't have the capacity to hold space for those emotions, because there are plenty of parents out there who can. Okay, but for some reason, whatever that might be, their own wounds, their own traumas, their own issues, they were not able to see you, right, for what you needed. These are some examples of things that can often lead to these abandonment and rejection wounds. And so I want to list a bunch of them for you so you can see maybe this is a connection for you. Let's say you were the child who was always watching her parents fight. Maybe her parents were constantly arguing, constantly fighting. And as that little girl, you're worried maybe they might break up, maybe they might divorce, maybe they might split. And then somehow you internalize that and you blame yourself for it. Maybe sometimes you heard them arguing about you or your dance schedule, or who the heck knows, right? It could be a multitude of things. But if you were that little child who's worried that their arguing and fighting is because of you, that's going to create these abandonment and rejection wounds inside of you, especially if there was a split or there was a breakup at some point, right? And if you're internalizing that into you and blaming yourself for it, that's going to create all kinds of nervous system dysregulation, and you're going to carry that into your adulthood. Okay, now maybe you experienced actually being left behind by a parent. Maybe that parent abandoned the entire family, or maybe they just weren't around and didn't show up for you. Maybe you were left behind in other ways. Maybe you were left out. Maybe that parent took the other siblings or the step siblings or whatever, and you were the one left behind. Maybe a parent moved away and never really called or never really came around or tried to see you or tried to get custody or tried to be in your life, right? And these are going to create these abandonment and rejection wounds for a child, okay? Let's say you were the little girl who was always the backup friend. Maybe you were never the first choice. As a little kid, if this is something that's happened to you continually, even like in sibling groups, right? If you were the sibling who was always left out and never really the one that was chosen, right? This is going to create these painful abandonment and rejection wounds. Let's say you were the teenager even, who you were always interested or falling for, or really, really liking those boys who would ignore you, and then maybe sometimes they would actually show interest, and then when you were showing your feelings, they would just dip out and they wouldn't like you and you would be left alone, right? And this is probably a pervasive pattern that happened because of what happened earlier even in your life. Maybe you were the woman who finds herself terrified. Maybe you're this person that every time an argument happens, it's going to mean the end of the relationship. I know that I have felt this deeply, many, many times in my relationship after my abuse, that every argument was going to be like, oh my gosh, we're going to break up. Oh my gosh, we're not going to be together anymore. This like deep fear every time an argument or disagreement happens, that you feel like it's going to be the end of the relationship. And it's not necessarily true, right? It's just because of the fears that we have and the abandonment and rejection wounds that we developed early in life. Maybe you're the woman who stayed in a toxic marriage for a really long time. And I've got my hand up because I was this person too. Because the thought of being alone is way worse than the pain of staying where you're at. Because there's this fear that, not only will you be alone, but that there's this like feeling of almost like nobody wants me, nobody wants to be with me. And that's, again, stemming from that abandonment and rejection wound from early in life. If you're constantly asking yourself questions in your current relationships, like, or dates, like if you're dating, or in friendships, like with people who you're friends with, and you're asking yourself, like, why am I not enough to make these people stick around? Like, what did I do? Like, why aren't they my friend anymore? Why do people always leave me? Why do people, always reject me? If this is coming up for you, it's likely because of these old traumas, these old abandonment wounds. And that this is important because we have to take a look at these things so that we can repair them, because they're never going to get better if we don't take action to repair them. If you're somebody who maybe believes that love always has like an ending or like an expiration date to it, I know that I've talked to several people who have this kind of thinking where it's like, oh, maybe this is just a temporary thing, or people are just going to be in my life for a short season and then they're going to dip out, right? That isn't the case for everyone. Yes, does it happen? Of course. And is there a place for seasons of relationships and friendships and things like that? Yes, absolutely. But if you believe on a deep core level that that's what it's going to be all the time, then your mind is going to zone in on that. It's going to see that more often, and it's going to make that the reality for you. Okay? And you may even do things like self-sabotage. You may even do things that confirm that, because that's how your brain is wired. Your brain wants to be right. So if you believe that love has an expiration date, or friendships are only like a short season or whatever, right? Your brain is going to come in and it's going to do something, whether that's like create an argument in that dynamic, whether it's that you block the person, whether it's that you start thinking worst case scenarios, and then there's like a blow up or something like that, and you're no longer friends with that person. Well, you may have created that scenario as a form of protection, right? Because your brain already believes that these things have expiration dates. And maybe, this is the final one that I have here, maybe you're a really strong woman, but you secretly wonder why you fall apart the moment someone pulls away. And I don't even mean like pulls away. This could be like someone doesn't text you back right away. This could be that a friend group plans something without you, right? This could be anything that you interpret as that feeling of abandonment or rejection from the past. Because not everyone has these same programs, right? Not everyone has abandonment and rejection wounds. So I'm speaking to the people who do, right? If you don't have abandonment and rejection wounds, when someone doesn't text you back right away or after several days or whatever, you're not going to fall apart because you don't have that fear. It's not familiar. It's not that like old record playing and you're like, oh no, like what's this? This is familiar. Like I know what this is like. This is like when my mom would give me the silent treatment when I was a kid, right? Because she was mad at me for whatever. So we've got to figure out like, okay, what was the wound? Where did it come from? And then how do we resolve it? So I'm going to help with that today. All right, now, if any of these things I mentioned feel familiar to you, I want you to know that it's okay. You're not broken, right? I have to keep reminding people of this because often we think, oh, there must be something wrong with me. But there's nothing wrong with you. You're carrying these old stories, these old programs, and these old wounds that have never been healed at the root. They've just been either soothed with something like a coping strategy. They've been stuffed, as in you are, shoving it under the rug. You're not dealing with it. You're not addressing it. However, the problem with this is oftentimes when you do that, it's going to resurface no matter what, right? You can't just keep it down. It's going to come up the next time something triggers that part of your nervous system that remembers. So I want to talk about these abandonment and rejection wounds and what they really are, okay? So these types of things happen when our core need, like our basic need for connection, and this is a real thing, right? Because it's been part of our survival for ages, right? Like we needed tribes to survive. If we were ousted from the tribe, we were all alone, right? It's way harder to survive on your own than it is when you've got a tribe of people supporting you, right? So this is all like embedded into our DNA, okay? So we need connection. We need our tribal people, okay? So these rejection wounds can be, can come from, tens of thousands of years, maybe hundreds of thousands of years into our history. But they happen when that core need for connection and belonging that we really, really want was met with these fears, with distances from people, even betrayals from others, right? So we have this need, we want to belong, but then we have these things that keep showing up for us that are like pushing it away. Fears, betrayals, things like that. So as a child, you don't have the logic to understand why these things happen. You don't have that ability to kind of reason in that way. So what do? We make it mean something. We make it mean often that we aren't good enough, that there's something wrong with me, that other people always leave me because I must be bad, I must be wrong, I must be not good enough. So that's the program, right? It starts very, very early. We don't have the ability to reason and logic our way through this, like, oh, this person, this adult doesn't have the emotional capacity because they have their own subconscious wounds and their own traumas and things like that, right? It doesn't, even if we did, it wouldn't take the pain away necessarily, but we don't even have that ability. We don't even have that. That's not even possible for a little child, right? So we just chalk it up to, well, there's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough, right? That's what actually happens when we are taking on these wounds, right? And when I say taking on these wounds, I don't mean that we are adopting these wounds and we're taking, we made them happen to us. No, an adult in your life or a person in your life, a caregiver, whomever, right? They created this fear, betrayal, distance, silence, like whatever that might be in your life. And you then made meaning out of it because you didn't know how to do anything else, right? So it's not your fault in any capacity. You did not know how to process this. You did not have the tools. You did not have the understanding or the logic or the reason or any of it, right? So the person or people who created these fears and betrayals and, feelings of abandonment and rejection in you, right? That's on them. But in order to heal, you as the adult, now you have to take back that power. You have to say, I am done letting this control my life. I am done letting this ruin the relationships that I'm in. I'm done letting this, cause problems in my friendships. Okay? So it's not always about these big things sometimes. Sometimes we think about, oh, if someone had this horrific attack on them, right? That's a huge trauma that they have to process. But sometimes it's these subtle things. It's these little things. It's these, silent treatments that our parents gave us, or, being left behind, or being totally outright rejected, maybe told we weren't good enough, right? When all we're doing is craving that connection, craving that, feeling of love from the people who are supposed to love us. And unfortunately for many people, that's just not a reality. So these little things can accumulate over time in our childhood and then cause us to behave in certain ways as adults. And often when we have abandonment and rejection wounds like this, the behaviors sabotage relationships, create anxiety inside of us, make us feel unworthy. Sometimes we might feel like we're being too much or too needy, right? Because we are craving that connection. And then as soon as we feel any sort of like disconnect from somebody, we're like, like we're freaking out. Like, what do I do? I'm going to lose this person too, and I need this person in my life, right? Now, let's pivot to attachment styles. So if you've never heard of attachment styles, there's lots and lots of resources, information, YouTube videos, books, whatever. But I'm just going to kind of give you like a high level breakdown of this. So attachment styles are like these little blueprints that we've developed as a kid to survive emotionally. Okay. It's like a little like instruction manual. And what they do is they help us predict if love and connection are safe or not, or if we're going to have to like really try harder or hustle to keep people around and in our lives. Okay, so think of it like a little blueprint or a little instruction manual that a kid has, developed to survive emotionally. Now, let's go through each style. So there's different styles. There is a secure style, which is the kid who grew up really, really emotionally stable because their parents have created this space for them to be safe. That's trust. That's closeness. That's knowing that love's going to stay even if people get mad or if they get angry or whatever, right? That emotions are okay. Like you're feeling very secure. There is an anxious style, which is the fear of abandonment, like deep fear of abandonment, needs of constant reassurance, right? Like, because otherwise your nervous system starts literally like getting super heightened and super afraid. The avoidant is where the person will like keep people at a distance to feel safe. Like they really, really struggle with closeness because they're trying to protect themselves. Because anytime maybe that they did feel close to someone, then that person either pulled away, rejected them, made them feel bad, like, or whatever. So the avoidant develops this like trauma adaptation behavior to keep people at bay. Like, I'm never going to get close to you, or never at least close enough to where we can have any sort of like real intimacy. Disorganized is where someone wants love so desperately, but they're also completely afraid of it. So it's kind of like this dichotomy here where like I really want to be loved and I really want to be in this relationship, but I'm also scared to death, right? So you may find yourself in one of these categories. Hopefully the secure one, but chances are if you're listening to this podcast episode, it's probably going to be anxious, avoidant, or disorganized. Now, there's an important thing I want to mention here, that attachment styles are so helpful to understand. Like, oh, this is mine. I'm an anxious, I'm an avoidant, I'm a disorganized. And I hear people say this a lot, and I see it on social media all the time. And this is super, super helpful to understand what you're experiencing. But I want to make sure that I'm very, very clear about this. This is not a life sentence. This isn't something that you say, oh, I'm an anxious, and I'm always going to be anxious in my relationships. I'm always going to fear abandonment, always going to need reassurance. Like, oh, you go into your next dating thing and you say, oh, I'm an anxious, and I just need somebody who's always going to be reassuring me, right? You might feel like that in the moment, but this is not a life sentence. These things are temporary states for you, okay? So if you're over here, you're one of these people and you're like, oh no, I've always been an anxious. Okay, fine, you can say that. But that doesn't mean you're destined to be that forever, right? Wouldn't you rather not be anxious? Wouldn't you rather not be avoidant? Wouldn't you rather not be disorganized, right? So when, people keep repeating these things, and I'm a big believer in, what you put out there is always going to come back to you, right? So if you're always saying, oh, well, it's just, I'm an anxious attachment, I'm an avoidant, it's like what you're doing is you're sending out the signal to the world stating, this is who I am, and this is who I'm always going to be. And your brain wants to look for proof and evidence that that's true. And so it's always going to find proof and evidence that that's true. It's like you're trying to explain why you keep repeating the same painful patterns, right? Well, that's just who I am. And I say this with as much love and understanding as I possibly can, but sometimes it can be an excuse not to change, right? Like, well, that's just me. I'm just an anxious attachment. But I'm here to tell you very gently that that's not true. You are so much more than your attachment style. You are so much more than your trauma. You are so much more than the wounds that other people have given you, okay? You're not destined to live out your attachment style forever. What it is, honestly and truly, is it's a pattern that your brain learned. It's an adaptation to your experiences and your traumas. That's it. It's the way that your brain and body has decided that it's going to survive utilizing this particular style, okay? But the good news is these patterns can be reprogrammed. They can be rewired. That's what I do. That's how I help women heal from these things. Now, I want to mention one quick thing here before we get into like what the true healing looks like. But when you label yourself a certain type of way, often what this does, it becomes like a cage that you live in, right? So labels can give you language for what you're feeling, and often we need that kind of language. We need to understand, oh yes, I have CPTSD, or oh yes, I have an anxious attachment style, or whatever that might be. It helps you understand. I mean, even when I figured out that I was being emotionally abused, when I had no idea that that was even a thing, right? I was like, oh my gosh, it was so validating, right? And that is really, really great. But like I said before, these can become these cages if you allow them to define you. If you just lean on them and you're leaning on these labels like, oh, this is what I am. This is what I have. This is just me, right? If you're constantly explaining your pain away as like just my attachment style, well, that's just my attachment style, then you're missing the point here. Healing is about changing how you feel and how you behave, not just naming the wounds, not just labeling what it is, right? And like I said before, this can sometimes be a way for us just to stay where we're at without actually having to change. It's like, well, that's just my attachment style, so that's just the way it is, and everybody else around me is just going to have to change to accommodate my attachment style. Okay? Is there a place for other people being aware of your style, to be considerate of your style, to help you through it when you're struggling with your style? Yes. Just like you would probably do for a loved one too. If you had a friend who had a specific type of attachment style and they told you about it, there's a difference though between enabling it and just supporting the person, right? And being mindful of what they're dealing with. Okay, so really inspect in yourself. Am I leaning too much on this? If I am feeling like, really attached to this particular label, am I leaning too hard on this? Am I really like hoping everybody else will just tiptoe around my attachment style or what I'm struggling with? And if so, what do I need to do to change that, to be the better version of me, to be that healthier version of me? Okay? Now, let's talk about what true healing really looks like. Okay? So, let's think about if you got a text from someone, right? And then let's say they asked you to go out for the weekend with them or something, a friend. And you're like so excited because you're feeling included, you're feeling loved, you're feeling that connection, right? But let's say you respond right away and you're like, oh my gosh, I would love to go. This sounds like so much fun. And then you don't hear back from that person. And a couple hours goes by, a couple days go by. You're like, what the heck? Like, why didn't they respond? Maybe you even reach out again and you don't hear back from them. And then you immediately start thinking, oh my gosh, I did something wrong. Oh my gosh, what was it about me? Blah, 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 right? All the things. Maybe you see hearing yourself in this, right? But what if it wasn't that? What if they sent you that text, they asked you to come, you felt really good about it, and then you didn't hear back from them for a couple of days? They're the one planning it, they're the one doing it, right? And you're just like, okay, well, I guess they'll let me know when everything, I said yes, I would like to come. So I'm just going to go about my life, do my thing. Maybe I even make other plans because they didn't nail anything down. Right? And you just feel at ease. That's what true healing looks like when you're not affected by it in this way anymore. Okay? That's just like a simple little example. Now, the other thing that it looks like, I believe, is choosing people who actually show up for you. Okay? So what I mean by this is, instead of you're like begging for the scraps of affection from somebody, you are just like, no, I'm not waiting around for this person who is not a supportive friend, partner. They don't actually take the time to want to hang out with me. They actually don't reciprocate the phone calls. They don't say what they mean and mean what they say and do what they say they're going to do, right? Like, because if you're like hanging on to those people and waiting for them to show up for you and change, what you're doing is you're waiting for them to affirm your value. Okay? So people who aren't reliable, people who don't show up for you, people who, don't do what they say they're going to do, right? If you're leaning on those people and like waiting for them to like do better, waiting for them to like show up, right? It's like almost somewhere in your subconscious, your mind is saying, if they do this for me, then that proves that I'm good enough, because their behavior means that I'm good enough. But that's not true, right? That's just the story your mind keeps telling you. So the healing part looks like moving on to the next person, right? I recently had a friend who I have been friends with for many, many years. I met her online. She was a friend of mine from the UK. And I had spent hours and hours and hours helping her, guiding her, supporting her. And one day, like, I had messaged her about something totally something about my community, and I never heard back from her. And a couple of weeks went by and I never heard back. A couple months went by. And then I started to think, oh my gosh, I wonder if something happened to her, because this isn't like her not to respond. So I reached out in a couple different places. And eventually I started to realize, like, wait a minute, what am I doing? This person's not responding to me. Clearly the message has been sent loud and clear, right? So because of the work that I do, I'm like, this is silly. Like, if this person doesn't want to be in my life or be my friend or respond to me, like, okay, that's fine. That's totally fine. I don't need to be chasing people. I don't need to be begging for like scraps from anybody, and neither do you. Okay? So if you're choosing people who show up for you, that's the like secret sauce here for healing, right? You're like, wait, no, this is the kind of person I want to be around. This is the kind of person I want in my life. Not these people who are just so flaky and like, I'm the one that's always texting them to hang out, and no. Okay? And another thing is that it's not just knowing why you feel afraid and like all the things that I mentioned before, right? Like the wounds of the childhood and the reasons that you might be in this like abandonment, rejection, wound place, right? It's not just knowing why, okay? Because you could probably be like, yep, that's probably why, because my mom, she always gave me the silent treatment, or I always had to perform in order to get attention, or like whatever, right? So it's not just knowing why. The healing part is not feeling afraid anymore. And you might be going, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to not feel afraid. Like every single person in my life, I'm always afraid they're going to leave me. I'm always afraid they're going to reject or abandon me, right? I get that. I do. But here's the thing. Healing these wounds, healing abandonment and rejection wounds, is not about just coping with it in the moment. Like, waiting for that next friend to come in your life and hoping and coping, like hoping that they're going to be a good friend and hoping that they're not going to abandon you or reject you, right? The wounds are in you. So you have to fix the wounds if you want the relationships to be better. Okay? It's about your internal freedom to love yourself and love others and not be afraid. There's an immense fear of vulnerability for people with abandonment and rejection wounds, because if you are your true self, if you express that you love and care about someone, if you tell this person, oh, I want to go out, I want to hang out with you more, like I really enjoy being with you, like things like that, speaking that out, telling people that truth, there's a big fear that maybe that person will be like, whoa, like you're, no, back up, pump the brakes, get out of here. Like, I don't, you're moving too fast, like whatever, right? Worrying that you'll be left behind, left out, pushed away, right? So healing these wounds is way more about like, one, loving yourself and knowing that you are a good enough person, regardless of how other people behave, regardless of other people show up for you or they don't, regardless of if other people invite you or don't invite you, respond to your text, don't respond, right? Like, hey, I'm good enough the way that I am, right? The right people are going to be in your life as long as you let them, right? Because if you're trying to live out these old wounds from childhood, chances are you're going to be attracted to the people who are familiar to the people in your life who created those wounds. So the friend who kind of reminds you of your mom, or the boyfriend who is always leaving like your dad did, right? You're going to be attracted to those people, not because like you want to be abandoned or rejected, but because it's familiar. Because it's like, oh, I know this, I recognize this, I know how to deal with this. You could be the person who's always like pushing away the really nice guys because, oh, that's not familiar and that's uncomfortable and I don't know what that is. Maybe this isn't real. Maybe this isn't true, right? So we got to work on these things and heal these wounds so that we can show up better in our lives for ourselves and for our people we love and in our relationships. I once worked with a client like similar to this who kept attracting men who would not be vulnerable with her, who were very surface level, who everything was physical. It was all about the physical aspect. And she was a very beautiful woman, but she had these abandonment wounds. She had these rejection wounds. And when she came to me, she had read all the books. She had learned about the attachment styles. She couldn't figure out, like, why do these guys keep, like coming around for a little while and then just leaving, right? But we figured out, obviously, this all was stemming from her subconscious programming. She was chasing people who really didn't have the capacity for that emotional availability, right? So these men, they were probably the avoidants, right? And she was the anxious. But what she was doing was she was recreating the situation from when she was a kid. When we figured this out, now it wasn't her dad in the situation, it was her mom, but her mom was extremely emotionally unavailable to her. And she was always trying to get that connection with her mom. She was always trying to get it. And all her mom did was criticize her and try to control her behavior and make her be what she wasn't. And so she was always finding this in other partners. So these men that she would be in relationship with, she would try to get this like emotional connection with them through the physical aspect. And then what would end up happening is that they would, probably is my guess, if they were avoidant, would start feeling that closeness and then get scared and then dip out, right? And that's a whole nother topic, right? Obviously, this this isn't about the other person. This is about my particular client. But she realized that she was chasing these people who were mirroring the same thing as what she experienced as a kid on a different level, but like still that emotional wounding of feeling like rejected and feeling like that lack of connection. And that's what she was seeking. She was seeking that out in her partners, but these partners were just mirroring her mom in that experience. Now, luckily, because we worked through the subconscious, we figured out the root of this, and she was able to reprogram it. Now she's in a happy relationship with someone. Now, I'm not going to say it's like, oh, overnight, right? She did a lot of work. She was dedicated, committed, because she was sick and tired of being in relationships like that. And that's what happens when you start committing to yourself and making actual changes instead of coping with it, instead of just, oh, maybe the next guy will be better. Oh, maybe no, because these things haven't been healed in you, right? They have to be healed in you first. And that is possible for you. So if you're tired of feeling like you're the one who's left behind, or you're the one who keeps getting rejected, or you're the one that's abandoned in all your relationships and your friendships, right? I want you to know that you do not have to stay here. Okay? You don't have to this isn't your life sentence. My job is to help women like you break free from these old wounds. Not just understand them, not just figure out why this happened, right? But how to heal them at the root. The why is great. It serves a purpose, right? Understanding this is very, very helpful. But just the why does not help you change, okay? There's a reason this podcast is called the Be a Better You podcast, right? Because part of my life's mission is to be the best version of me that I can. Every single day I work at it, right? And I get better, I improve, and I want that for you too. So I offer a free 30-minute consultation. We can talk about your story, where you're feeling stuck. There's no pressure, anything like that. Just understanding you, having a space to talk, and we can just like kind of go over all the things that maybe have been keeping you stuck, and I can help you understand what could be possible for your healing. So if you've been nodding your head through this episode like, oh, that's me, or oh yeah, or maybe you even see a friend in this, maybe you could send them this episode, right? Send me a DM with the word heal. We'll set up a time to chat. You can email me at Allison at radiate.rise.com. I did want to mention that there is a button in my on my podcast that says send us a chat, and you can send me a chat there. The problem with this is I don't know, it doesn't tell me your name, it doesn't give me your phone number or anything like that. Okay, so it only comes to me, so no one else is going to see it. So if you need support and help, you're going to have to either leave me your phone number and email address or your name or something where I can get a hold of you. I had someone from Calgary message me, said, hi, I think I'd like help. And unfortunately, I have no way of reaching you, whoever that is. There's no name, there's no phone number, and my podcast platform does not allow me to see who it is that sent that. So if that's you, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to chat with you, happy to support you. And if you decide to use that button, make sure, any of you listening, make sure that you include your details so that I can get a hold of you. I don't know why it does that, but I think because it's called fan mail, and it's like people will just say, oh, I love your podcast, thank you so much, blah, 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 that sort of thing. And I don't really necessarily need to respond to those, but someone like this who said, I think I'd like help. Well, I'd love to help you. So if you're listening to this, please reach out to me. Okay, so you're not too broken, you're not too needy, you're not too much, depending on what your attachment style is, right? Like this one sort of was focusing on the anxious side of attachment. And if you want me to do other attachment styles in more depth, I certainly can do that. But again, I don't want you leaning on the attachment style and the label, because that's not where the healing is, right? You are not destined to be left behind forever. You're not destined to be rejected and abandoned forever, right? this kind of healing is totally possible for you. And it can happen a lot faster and more gently than you ever thought it could happen. Okay? So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. I hope this episode has been helpful to you. And if there are any other topics or ideas that you'd like for me to add to this podcast, I'm happy to do that. So just think about the things that you're struggling with and let me know. And I'm always here for you. Thanks, and I will talk to you next week.